Hello everyone. Thank you for joining me for my weekly chat with a college prep guru. This week I am chatting with Joe Messenger, partner and director of college planning at Capstone Wealth Partners and an expert on all things financial aid. Welcome, Joe.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course. Happy to chat with you about this. So, first, before we get into the questions and really dig into financial aid, why don't you tell us how you got into this work?
It really started probably 10 to 12 years ago when I was in my late 20s. Friends were graduating from graduate school, medical school, and all those sorts of things. And I was a financial advisor already for about 6 or 7 years. And they would ask me questions like, what do I do with my loans? And I would say, I have no idea. That's nothing we're ever trained on to be a financial advisor. So really just kind of started figuring out that really nobody was ever trained on how to do this stuff. So said we'll figure it out ourselves and make it part of what we do. So
awesome.
Yeah.
Well, it's good to have experts like you who actually know what they're doing.
Yeah. So that's kind of the deal. So
cool. So through that experience, I mean, you've been working with clients for how long now?
Since 2002 as an advisor, and then really specifically focused on this space since 2008.
Okay. So quite a long time, about 10 years. Yeah. So through that experience, what have you found to be like the biggest struggle that families are having going through this process?
I think it's just like, I call it the college funding maze. It's so much more complex than it was 20, 30 years ago when a lot of our parents went through it, and what's at stake. So I think the complexity and understanding all the ins and outs and the financial aid system and just how to make sure they make a smart decision. It's not easy.
Yeah, it's definitely not simple. And that's kind of one question that I have that maybe you could help kind of break down some of these acronyms that are thrown around, because I think that's kind of a good starting place is what are we actually talking about? Can we spell some of these things out so that folks have a good foundation?
Yeah, I kind of call it the alphabet soup of financial aid.
Yeah.
And there are a lot. A few that it kind of starts with is one they would call COA, which would be cost of attendance, which is important because that is where things start with financial aid, and that encompasses really everything. So tuition, room, board, fees, everything that it will cost for a student to attend that school. So that would be the first one. Mm-hmm. And then the next one would be the expected family contribution, or EFC. Because the aid formulas are driven on the cost of attendance at the school minus what's determined to be your expected family contribution equals your financial need at the school. So that's really a couple to start with. So those are kind of the foundation. And then from there, it gets into how do they actually come up with this expected family contribution? And then we get into another a bunch of acronyms. One that people may have heard is the FAFSA. So hard to pronounce, but the free application for federal student aid, which 99.9% of families should file regardless of your income and assets. So that's really what determines your federal expected family contribution. To basically what that expected family contribution is, it's what they think you should be able to afford out of your income and assets. So that's kind of what drives that. So that's kind of the first formula that comes in, the federal formula. You file the FAFSA, drives the federal formula, gives you your expected family contribution. So alphabet soup, like I said. So
yeah, doesn't sound so bad when you break it down like that, but
yeah.
I know that it can seem kind of complicated when you're just hearing all these different acronyms thrown at you all the time. You mentioned that 99.9, I think you said, % of families should fill the FAFSA out. Can you dig into that a little bit? Because I know that a lot of times families are like, oh, we don't need to fill that out because we're not going to receive any kind of aid.
Yeah, so there's a couple reasons. Number one is you file it every year. So it's not like you just file it once. Every year you're in school, you file that application for federal aid. So a couple things are, number one, a lot of schools, even to get their merit scholarships that have nothing to do, even if you make $10 million a year, to get the merit scholarships at the school, they require you to fill out the forms. Mm-hmm. So that's thing number one. Thing number two is that one of the federal aid programs that's out there, the largest one, is actually direct student loans. So if that's part of your equation at all, you have to fill that out to ensure that your student receives those each year. And then the third thing would be situations change from year to year. Maybe a parent loses a job or gets injured or, something like that. So having a basis so that you could go back even mid-year and tell them, hey, we've got this on file, but things have changed dramatically. So that those are a couple big reasons why most financial aid administrators would say, just file it, get it on, make sure it's on file regardless of if you don't think you're going to get any need-based aid.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what we tell people, but it's nice to hear it explained from an expert who knows these are the real reasons why you need to fill it out, and you need to fill it out every year. And you need to fill it out as soon as possible, right? Not waiting until the last minute. Right.
I mean, I equate that to if you fill it out early, you're basically saying, if you have money, I would like it. So it's that simple, really. So if getting it in, and that form opens up October 1st, the fall, for really the next fall. We're filing in the fall now for the next fall and spring's academic year. So it's much sooner than some people may think. And our general recommendation is it opens October 1st. Make sure you get it done by November 1st.
Yeah, I think that's a good rule of thumb. Keep you on track. Go ahead and set that faux deadline. We're a big advocate of setting faux deadlines. So one more acronym while we're kind of talking about this that I know is mentioned and I get a lot of questions about is the CSS Profile. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, so CSS stands for College Scholarship Search, and it's run by the College Board and the collegeboard.org. So a lot of families may be familiar with that because they also administer the SAT. So I equate it to, I always say there's really two systems at play. The CSS Profile is required by about 300 to 400 schools. It changes a little bit each year, but those are the schools typically that are the highest priced and the most elite universities. It requires about 50 to 60% more information from you. So it actually has a lot more detail. And I always say this is the form where if you have pennies buried under the back deck, they'll find them. So they dig really deep to really find everything out. But the good news is when they're doing that, they do a really good job for families that do have financial need. If you have need, most of those schools will meet at or near 100% of it. So doing a good job. And making sure that the numbers match on the FAFSA and the CSS Profile is really important, making them consistent. So recommendation is fill out the FAFSA, print out the information from the FAFSA because a lot of it is the same, and make sure that translates directly to the CSS Profile.
Okay, great tips. Thank you for covering that because I do get that question a lot. So maybe you can break it down. Say we have a family who is starting early. They have maybe an incoming freshman in high school or maybe junior high students. What's the one tip you would give them? And then let's contrast that with maybe a junior or a senior.
Yeah, so I call it giving yourself runway is really important in this process because that junior and senior year comes really fast. I'm sure most parents would say, I blinked and they were a junior or a freshman in high school. So the sooner you can start and just kind of get your arms around what your financial aid opportunities may be that are you a need-based family or are you a merit-based, meaning that will you qualify for need-based aid or do we need to just kind of get that off the table and focus on schools that give us merit scholarships? I think identifying that early is really important. And then also just getting honest with yourself. If you have a freshman, you've got a few years to plan still. So, the more you can save, $200 a month into like a college savings plan may not sound like much, but by the time they get there, you're going to have $10,000, $12,000. So it's never too early to start and ramp those savings up. So even if you have a freshman, anything you can do. So what we find a lot of times is that parents, as they get closer to college, they're into their mid 40s and they're in their peak earning years. Whereas, they hadn't maybe had the ability to save, but as they get those raises and they really start making good incomes, they now maybe have a little extra money to put towards a plan. So those 2, 3, 4 years can really help. And, for the juniors and seniors, it's similar, but that really gets into beginning to build out your college list, being strategic about it. so that you can build a good college list that meets your unique circumstances. So if you're need-based or if we're just looking for merit scholarships, identifying those schools that are they're gonna discount you. That's the way I think about it. So the ones that are going to give you free money.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and we've talked about this before, that there are actually schools out there that do not offer merit scholarships, right?
Right. Yeah. A lot of our most elite schools that are $65,000-$70,000 plus, they only accept maybe 3 to 5% of the students that get in. So the only way that they award financial aid is on a need basis. Kind of the thought process for them is basically that, if we had merit scholarships, how would we ever decide? Everybody was a valedictorian and had a 34 ACT plus. So they really have said, we don't want money to be a barrier for those bright kids that can get in. So we'll fill the bucket. We'll make sure that that money is not an issue above and beyond what the formula determines. So the key there is, I think, particularly for families that are looking at schools, never rule a school out based on the price. It's all about your net cost. So that's something I always drive home, figuring out what your net cost is. And every school now is required to have what's called the net price calculator on their website. So you can go even today, if you've got a freshman, and plug in some information about a student, about grades and ACT. You may not know exactly, but then your financials, and it will give you, if you were to come here today, here's a projection of what your out-of-pocket cost would be. So that's a really helpful tool.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great tip, and what a great resource we have now access to, that all these schools are required to do that. So that is really helpful in the planning process if you are starting early. So this has been great. I really appreciate it. What a perfect foundation. We're talking all about financial aid in September to prepare for that October 1 release date for the FAFSA. So this is perfect. So thank you. To wrap things up, we always ask the same question. Do you have any other tips or tricks for families on the college-bound journey?
I would just say that 2 really good free websites that you can create a profile and begin to discover some of these financial aid pieces of the puzzle, how they work, and even compare them side by side. One is collegeboard.org. It's a really great kind of think tank. And then another is collegedata.com. Those are just 2 really good sites to begin to try and get your arms around. If we were to go here, what would that look like? What's the cost? How do they award aid? Those types of things. So those are 2 really good places to look that have great resources. And instead of going to every school by itself, they've got most of the information right there. Create a profile. You can save your schools, and that's a really good way to start the journey.
Perfect. Well, we'll be sure to link to those when we post this video so that families can easily access those and get started. So thank you again. It's been a pleasure. I really appreciate it. But maybe we'll have you on again in the future to kind of dig into some of these other financial aid issues.
Awesome. Thanks, Jordan. Good luck.
Yeah, thank you.